kill it?
No, keep this thing, this fan's alive. There's it. But I got it somewhere in it.
Good. Sir, say good morning. Good evening.
Good evening.
Welcome to our service. Jerry, you start us off with a word of prayer.
Heavenly Father, we thank you for allowing us to be out here this evening. We just thank you for our church and those that we go to church with, Lord. We just ask you to bless these that's made their way out and bless those that are home. We pray for Charlie and all his loved ones, Lord. That you help them in the morning. Just ask that you bless your pastor, Lord, and bless all the prayer requests. See each other's home safely. We ask it in Jesus' name.
We're going to have testimony.
Yeah, Lord, thank you for all his blessings, his beautiful day he's given us. He's just so good to us.
So I love the Lord, I miss not being here this morning. Pretty strong.
Oh, Lord, I'm thankful for all he's done for me and my family. I'm glad to be here. Thankful for a good day today. Just Charlie too.
We were just talking, about taking, saying hallelujah out of the Lord. Remember, wasn't that just a couple, maybe last Sunday or something that long ago, we talked about taking that.
Oh, so we could play it.
We probably got it on.
Yeah, we could probably go back and find it. That's a good thought. You want to have a prayer request?
Remember the nice thing.
It's up here now.
And then when I lost my ones,
Coach was David on Jack, yeah. He said his cancer was back. So we're in. One guys I work with at the school, he's having surgery next Monday, week from tomorrow. So we're in St. Paul. Remember my Aunt Kathy Bryant Early's wife. She's got some issues, and she was in the hospital. I'm not sure if she's out there. I just remember her. You might have been spoken. Let me tell you this one of them. Remember Charlie's family. Michael asked prayer for his family. They traveled and went to Tennessee. So, let's have a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful day and the opportunity to be here and have service. And we thank you for those who made it out, and for those maybe watching at home, watching later. We just thank you for all your blessings. We ask you to be with those who are sick and those who are traveling and those facing surgeries. I ask you to be with the families, with Charlie's family and all those that lost loved ones, dear Lord, and May's family, and be with those who are facing sicknesses and illnesses and just all kinds of troubles, Lord. We just ask you to lift them up. We ask you to be with our country, and be with our community, and be with our church. And these things we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, we'll be in Ecclesiastes chapter 2 this evening. We did talk about chapter 1 this morning. I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth, therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men, which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great works, I builded me houses, I planted me vineyards. I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. I made me pools of water, to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. And I also had great possessions of great and small cattle, all that were in Jerusalem, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings of the provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men, as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy, for my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, and on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. And I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do that cometh after the king? Even that which hath been already done. Then I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. The wise man's eyes are in his head, but the fool walketh in darkness. And I myself perceived it, also that one event happeneth to them all. Then I said in my heart, as it happened to the fool, so it happeneth even to me. And why was I then more wise? Then I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For there is no remembrance of the wise man more than of the fool forever, seeing that which now is in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man? As the fool. Therefore I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous to me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. Yea, I hated all my labor which I had taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. And who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. Therefore I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and great evil. For what hath man of all his labor and all the vexation of his heart? Wherein he hath labored under the sun. For all his days were sorrows, and his travail grief. Yea, his heart taketh not rest in the night. This is also vanity. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw, that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, or who else can hasten hereunto more than I? For God giveth to a man that is good in his sight wisdom and knowledge, and joy. But to the sinner he giveth travail, to gather and to heap up, that he may give to him that is good before God. This also is a vanity of vexation and vexation of spirit. Solomon's on a roll, isn't he? Yeah. I tried to enunciate, well, actually, it's funny because I wrote this down because that was my plan. I really did enunciate the words I, me, myself, and mine. This chapter has a lot of me, myself, and I. I remember when we were kids and we used to say that. I was trying to remember why we said that. Wasn't there a joke? If someone would say, who's going to do that? You'd say me, myself, and I or something. But Solomon has a me complex in this chapter. He's still searching for the meaning of life. He's supposedly the smartest man in the world, but when you read this book, it seems like he's not. Sometimes I wonder if he's just, I don't know what to wonder sometimes. But he wrote this book to let us know that there's no meaning without God. And like I did this morning, when you come to each chapter, I'm going to read the last 2 verses of the book. Ecclesiastes 12 says, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil." Solomon searched for happiness in worldly things and concluded that the only thing that matters is obeying and fearing God. And that while this book is filled with depressing thoughts, through them, Solomon found the true meaning of life. And he wrote this book so we won't make the same mistakes that he did, or that a lot of people continue to do. Solomon concludes that life without God is meaningless. And we need to keep this in mind as we go through this book, because it seems depressing if you don't look. It is depressing if you don't look at things from a heavenly perspective. This world can be depressing if you don't look at things in a heavenly perspective. I mean, it would be depressing if this was all there was when someone died. When Charlie passed away, it would be, I mean, we're sad we miss him, but we know where he's at and we know he's happy. So in verse 1, Solomon says, "I said in mine heart, I will prove thee with mirth and pleasure." Solomon is speaking to himself, saying, "Okay, self, let's find out what makes me happy. Let's find out what makes life meaningful." Now, his father, David, was a man after God's heart, and he sought to please God. Solomon, at this point in his life, is seeking only to please himself. And he asked himself instead of asking God. And we should ask God, what will bring meaning to my life? But he's asking himself. And he says that first he'll test with mirth. Now, the definition of mirth is amusement or gladness, especially with laughter. And he continues in verse 1 and says that he will enjoy pleasure. But he said it's also vanity, it's also meaningless. And he said of laughter in verse 2, it's mad, and of mirth, what doeth it? Now Solomon wrote in Proverbs 17:22 that a merry heart doeth good like medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. And some verses translate this to laughter is the best medicine. That's where the saying laughter is the best medicine came from. But apparently Solomon forgot that he wrote this. Or maybe he wrote this later. I don't know. But at this point, his spirit was broken. He had spent his life trying to do things to satisfy himself, and it wasn't working. Then he says, I sought in my heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was good for the sons of men. So he tried to use wine while keeping his wisdom. He tried to drink wine and keep his wits about him. Now, I'm not as wise as Solomon. Although if you just take 3 or 4 verses out of context, you could say that we're all smarter than Solomon, but we know we're not. But I don't see how you can keep using wisdom and wine at the same time. Unless you're drinking just one glass, maybe. Wine can definitely lead to foolishness, but I don't know if you're still holding on to wisdom at this point. But Solomon was testing everything to see what was good for man. It's almost like he's saying, don't knock it until you try it. You hear people say that all the time. So he tried it. And it's interesting to note that Solomon also wrote in Proverbs 21 that wine is a mocker, strong drink a brawler, and whoever is led astray by it is not wise. He didn't think he was led astray. He thought he was still wise. Maybe he stopped before he was led astray or fell into foolishness, but wine, folly, and mirth, laughter, did not give meaning to his life. So he tried something else. Verse 4 says, I made me great works. I built me houses. I planted me vineyards. When I first started working on chapter 2, I wasn't going to do the King James Version because I thought it sounded funny, and he kept saying, I made me works, I made me houses. And then I thought, but it kind of proves the point that he was only caring about himself. And after he built the temple that his father and God told him to build, he built his palace. And he took longer building his palace than he did the temple. And he also built a separate palace for his wife. you could go into a whole discussion about why he would do that. But he did. But Solomon's got a purpose in all these projects. He's hoping to find purpose in life. Now, the scope of his works is seen in the fact that everything he lists is in the plural. His buildings, his landscape projects were great projects. But the list is self-serving. His works are not for the public, but for himself. In verses 4 through 6, he says, I made myself. It's repeated 4 times. It's obvious that his works were not for the people to enjoy, but they were entirely for himself. And maybe if he built something for others, it would have given meaning to his life. And he continues on, I made me gardens and orchards, and I planted trees in them of all kinds of fruits. In the book of 1 Kings, it tells us about his wisdom, and it says that he taught people about plant life. So he knew what he was doing when it comes to planting gardens. And he thought if he surrounded himself with pleasant things, that his heart would also be pleasant. But this wasn't the case. A heart made right by God can experience joy no matter where you're at, no matter what you're going through. Verse 6 says he made pools of water to water the forest and his trees and his gardens with. He did have great worldly wisdom. He knew what all to do to make his gardens grow. He says, I got me servants and maidens and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle, above all that were in Jerusalem before me. He had more cattle than anyone ever had. He also had great numbers of horses. He doesn't mention it here, but 1 Kings tells us of all the horses that he had. Verse 8 says, I gathered me silver and gold and treasure of the kings, men and women singers, musical instruments. Solomon was rich. He had unbelievable amounts of gold and massive amounts of silver. 1 Kings chapter 10 tells us that he was greater in riches and wisdom than all the other kings of the earth. And he made silver as common as stones. All of his goblets in his home were of gold, and in his palace and the forests of Lebanon were pure gold. Nothing was made of silver, because silver was considered of little value in Solomon's days. He was so rich that silver had little value. In the last part of verse 8, he talks about the male and female singers. I read that music was a rare pleasure in those days, but Solomon could afford to bring them into his home. But that didn't fulfill him either. Enjoyment will decrease unless the intensity of the pleasure increases. There's always thought about getting the next thing, and that would do it. You thought about getting more. You thought that getting more something would do it, and it doesn't. So then where do you go? Solomon's telling us, don't think that the next thing will do it. Don't think that the more will do it, because I had the next thing and I had the more and it didn't do it. Verse 9, he says, I was great and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. The rich get richer, but they're still not happy. We see it all the time. We see it in Hollywood, football players, basketball players. They're never happy. But he says that his wisdom's still with him. But again, at this point, his wisdom is his worldly wisdom. I talked this morning, God gave him wisdom. But then he sought out more wisdom, and he sought out worldly wisdom. God gave him a godly wisdom, but he wanted more. And he said that in verse 10, he said, whatever my eyes desired, I kept not from him. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion. Whatever he wanted, he got. And while he was gathering, while he was building all these things, his heart rejoiced. But, verse 11 says, then he looked back on all the works, all the things he built, all the work he'd done, and he said it was all meaningless, and there was no profit. So it took 7 years to build the temple. He doesn't really talk about the temple here. He's talking about all the things he built for himself. But he spent 13 years, almost twice as long, building his palace. And then, like I said, he built his wife her own palace. He built cities. He built a great wall. He built cities in can't think of the word, in strategical places to help trade and also to protect them. And while he was doing this, he was happy. But when he was finished, it was like he was thinking, what did I do all this for? He was still empty inside. Verse 12 says, and I turned myself to behold wisdom and madness and folly. He always turns back to his wisdom. But it's his wisdom that he's turning back to, not God's wisdom. Trying to be fulfilled. So he thinks, okay, I'm pretty smart. It's going to be okay. Verse 13, he says, I saw that wisdom excelleth folly, as far as light excelleth darkness. And I perceived also that one event happeneth to them all. Then I said in my heart, as it happens to the fool, so it happens even to me. Why then was I more wise? Then I said in my heart, this is also vanity. I said this morning, vanity means meaningless. It was all meaningless to him. And now he's upset that the same ending is going to come to the fool that's going to come to him. A wise man and a fool both die. Then he says, for there is no remembrance of the wise man more than of the fool forever, seeing that which is now in the days to come shall all be forgotten. And how dieth the wise man as the fool? Wisdom is better than foolishness, but it can't help you escape an earthly death. An earthly death. But if you use wisdom to accept Jesus, then that wisdom is definitely better than folly. But Solomon was only looking at the things under the sun, only the things in this world. Verse 17, therefore I hated life, because all the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit. And I mentioned this morning that that translates to meaningless and chasing after the wind. That flies up here now, Jerry. He hates his life because all of his wisdom and all his wealth and all that he's done doesn't make him any better than a poor fool. No, we're all equal. And Solomon, at this point, was upset that he would have the same fate as a fool on earth. And then he says, I have hated all my labor which I have taken under the sun, because I should leave it unto the man that shall be after me. So now he hates all that he's done because he doesn't get to keep it forever. Because he can't take it with him. Because he has to leave it to somebody else. In verse 19 he said, who knoweth whether he shall be a wise man or a fool? Yet shall he have rule over all my labor wherein I have labored, and wherein I have showed myself wise under the sun. This also is vanity. So now he's upset that he may leave everything he's worked for a fool. But he's leaving it to his children. Even if they're fools, they're his fools, right? We want to leave something to our children, don't we? Therefore, I went about to cause my heart to despair of all the labor which I took under the sun. For there is a man whose labor is in wisdom and in knowledge and in equity. Yet to a man that hath not labored therein shall he leave it for his portion. This also is vanity and great evil. He was grieved, he was in despair, he was upset because he'd accumulated so much and worked so hard, only to leave it to someone who didn't work for it at all. And he's leaving it to his sons. So back then, I don't think the daughters got much, did they? But here's the thing, Solomon wasn't born poor. You know, he didn't exactly work for everything he had. He was born in a palace. King David left him a wealthy king. And he left him supplies and set up everything he needed to build the temple. And his wisdom came from God. He didn't make himself wise. Solomon took what his father gave him and what God gave him, and he multiplied it greatly. But he was upset that he'd be leaving it to his son. God gives us gifts. He wants us to use them to multiply His kingdom. And when we get to heaven, we'll all be rich. We'll be in a place where gold is plentiful. So plentiful that the streets are paved in. And silver probably won't even be there. Maybe it will, I don't know. I have no idea. I can only imagine. Solomon continues to show that hard work bears no lasting fruit for those who work only to earn money and gain possessions. Not only will everything be left behind at death, but it may be left to those who have done nothing to earn it. In addition, it may not be well cared for. And all that was gained may be lost. Now, maybe Solomon was even smarter than we think, because, in fact, his son Rehoboam, Rehoboam, I always get them mixed up. Anyhow, it was Rehoboam, wasn't it? You know. Anyhow, Solomon's son was not wise. So maybe Solomon was so smart, and that's why he's so sad. Because his son was very foolish. And he made a very foolish decision right after he became king, and it split the kingdom. Solomon was actually the last king to be over all 12 tribes. Well, I guess his son technically was for a few days. It could have been weeks or months, but it wasn't very long. So Solomon was right. He was leaving it to the full. But that, he shouldn't have worried about it. He wasn't going to be there. But that bothered him too. Now, we're supposed to work hard. Hard work done with the right motives, caring for your family, serving God, is not wrong. We have to work to survive, and we're responsible for taking care of those under our care. But hard work done only to glorify ourselves, has no everlasting meaning. It leads to grief, while serving God leads to everlasting joy. Now, in verse 24, Solomon makes his first positive statement in this book. He says, "There is nothing better for a man than he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw that it was from the hand of God. For who can eat, who else can hasten it more than I?" Solomon admits that real joy comes from God. Solomon pursued fulfillment through pleasure, through wine, through great works, through wealth, through artistic pleasure, fame, and none of these gave him satisfaction. He writes this book to tell us that that's not how you get fulfilled. The wisest, richest man warned us about this, and 3,000 years later, people are still trying to find fulfillment and satisfaction in these same things that he tells us won't bring us fulfillment. I don't know if you like the Rolling Stones, but Mick Jagger said, "I can't get no satisfaction." He tried and tried and tried. He tried everything but Jesus. And so many people live under the false hope of, "I'll be happy when." Fill in the blank, They have something or some set of circumstances that they want to happen that they think will make them happy. And they assume that once they achieve them, experience them, then they will be satisfied and finally be fulfilled and happy forever. And Solomon tries to tell everyone who would listen that only a life with God will give you meaning. If we don't serve God, then we're serving the devil, whether we believe it or not. Or believe in his lies that the world will give you satisfaction. Jesus came and said in John 10:10, "The thief does not come except to steal." He's talking about the devil. He says, "I have come that they may have life and they may have it more abundantly." And the life of Jesus is abundant, and it's full, and it's meaningful, and it's fulfilling, and it's joyous, and it's exciting. And it's easy to forget about that, and to think that we have to work so hard and make our own enjoyment, make our own, a life with God is meaningful. And Solomon spent all kinds of time and money and trying to find another way to find satisfaction, but in the end, he realized it was with God, and he wrote this book to tell us these things. And we're going to go through this book. And, I don't know. Hopefully, I won't bore you too much. Anybody else have anything? Jerry, you say a prayer to dismiss us?